Picture this. You arrive at the US Open expecting the familiar scene. The biggest tennis stars in the world are everywhere. The grounds are packed, cameras are flashing, and fans are rushing from one court to another trying to catch a glimpse of the next superstar. Then something starts to feel different. Filipino flags are appearing everywhere. Groups of fans are arriving long before the scheduled matches. The noise around one particular court keeps getting louder. And eventually, tournament staff are hearing the same question from fans again and again. When does Alex play? At first, it might sound like a normal case of fans supporting their favorite player. But this was becoming something much bigger. Alex wasn't a defending Grand Slam champion. She wasn't a decade-long tennis icon with millions of followers around the world. She was a 21-year-old Filipina who, not long ago, was still trying to convince the tennis world that she belonged among the best. Yet somehow, in less than 2 years, everything had changed. A player who began 2025 ranked outside the world's top 100 was now standing at the center of one of the most fascinating stories in tennis. And the most surprising part wasn't simply how quickly Alex was climbing the rankings. It was what her rise was doing to an entire nation. To understand why the crowds became so emotional, you have to go back to a number that doesn't sound particularly impressive: 130. That was Alex's ranking at the beginning of 2025. In professional tennis, a ranking like that usually means you're still fighting for recognition. You're battling through qualifying draws, searching for opportunities, playing smaller events, and hoping that one breakthrough can finally change your career. The spotlight usually belongs to the players near the top, the names everyone knows, the champions who already have Grand Slam trophies and years of history behind them. Alex was nowhere near that world yet. But there was one thing separating her from many of the other young players trying to break through. There were already signs that she possessed something special. Her junior career had offered a glimpse of what might be coming. She had climbed as high as a world number 2 in the junior rankings and became the first Filipina to win a junior Grand Slam singles title. Those achievements mattered because they showed that Alex could compete with the best players of her generation. But junior tennis can be deceptive. Plenty of young players dominate at that level and then struggle when they enter the professional game. The courts feel different. The opponents are stronger. The matches become more physical. The travel becomes relentless. Suddenly, you're no longer playing against teenagers who are still developing. You're facing experienced professionals who know exactly how to expose weaknesses. That is where many promising careers begin to stall. Alex's didn't. Instead of fading away when the competition became tougher, she kept improving. Slowly at first, almost quietly, she began collecting victories. One win became another, then another. And eventually, people started realizing that this wasn't just a young player having a good week. Something much bigger was happening. Alex was beating players she wasn't supposed to beat. Every upset changed the conversation around her. Every new tournament gave her more confidence. And with every victory, the ranking that once seemed so far away began moving closer. Then came the climb that completely changed how the tennis world viewed her. By August 2026, Alex had reached world number 18. Stop and think about that for a moment. A player who had started 2025 ranked 130th in the world was now inside the WTA top 20. And she wasn't simply climbing a few positions. She was breaking barriers that had stood for Philippine tennis for years. Her ranking became a record for Philippine tennis and a major moment for Southeast Asian tennis. For the first time, a Filipino player had broken into the WTA top 20. But the ranking was only one part of the story. Alex had already accomplished things that had once seemed almost unimaginable for a Filipino singles player. She became the first Filipino to defeat a top 10 opponent. She became the first to reach the 4th round of a Grand Slam. She reached the semifinal of a WTA 1000 event. And then came another historic milestone, becoming the first Filipino singles player to win a WTA Tour title. Suddenly, the conversation was no longer about whether Alex had potential. That question had already been answered. The new question was, how far could she actually go? And while tennis fans around the world were asking that question, something else was happening thousands of miles away in the Philippines. People who had never followed professional tennis closely were suddenly paying attention. Families were staying awake to watch matches. Fans were checking schedules just to find out when Alex would play. Social media feeds were filling with clips, reactions, celebrations, and messages of support. A sport that had never occupied the same cultural space as basketball, boxing, or volleyball was suddenly getting a completely different kind of attention. That's important because the Philippines has always had a powerful sporting culture. Basketball is deeply embedded in everyday life. Boxing has produced legendary figures who became national icons. Volleyball has built passionate communities of supporters. Tennis, however, never had that same level of mainstream visibility. The country had talented players, but it didn't have a modern singles superstar competing regularly against the world's elite. The infrastructure and professional pathway weren't comparable to the major tennis nations either. So when Alex began winning, she wasn't simply adding victories to her own record. She was creating something that Filipino fans had been waiting for without necessarily realizing they were waiting for it. Suddenly, they had someone they could point to and say, "She's one of ours, and she's competing with the best in the world." That emotional connection became impossible to ignore when Alex arrived in Washington, D.C. What happened there was the moment the tennis establishment began realizing that Alex's popularity wasn't just online hype. It was real, and it was getting bigger. Before the tournament had even properly reached its most important stages, the attention surrounding Alex was already extraordinary. Her pre-tournament press conference reportedly attracted around 171,000 online views. That's an astonishing amount of interest for a player who had only recently entered the international spotlight. Even more revealing was the comparison with some of the biggest names competing at the same event. Players with far more established reputations were attracting significantly less attention to their press conferences. Then the online interest turned into something much harder to ignore. People started showing up. Alex was scheduled to play on a relatively small court with a capacity of roughly 1,500 spectators. On paper, it made sense. She was still a rising star, not one of the tournament's traditional headline attractions. But the organizers quickly discovered that the demand didn't match the size of the court. Fans arrived in huge numbers. The available space filled up. Walkways became crowded. People were desperate to get close enough to watch Alex play. Some supporters reportedly arrived without tickets, hoping they could still experience the atmosphere around the court. Think about what that means from a tournament organizer's perspective. You're preparing a regular day of professional tennis. You've planned your schedule, assigned courts, managed security, and estimated the crowds. Then suddenly, one match starts attracting a level of attention that the venue simply wasn't designed to handle. And the strange part was that Alex wasn't playing in a Grand Slam final. She wasn't even on the biggest court. The crowd was coming because they wanted to see her. Then Alex kept winning, and every victory created another wave of interest. The more she advanced, the more people wanted to be there. What started as curiosity began turning into genuine belief. Filipino fans weren't simply coming to watch a tennis match. They were coming to witness something historic. You could see it in the flags filling the stands. You could hear it in the chants. You could feel it in the way the crowd reacted to every point. For many of these fans, Alex represented something far beyond sport. She represented a country finally seeing itself reflected on one of tennis's biggest stages. And then Washington reached the moment that brought everything together. Alex made her way through a series of difficult matches, defeating accomplished opponents along the way, and eventually found herself facing Jessica Pegula in the final. By then, the atmosphere had completely changed. The story was no longer simply about whether a young player could win another tournament. The event itself had become part of Alex's growing legend. Philippine flags filled the stands. Fans were chanting her name. The energy felt almost like a national celebration happening inside an international tennis tournament. And perhaps the clearest sign that something unusual was happening came from the tournament chairman, who described the crowd as potentially one of the biggest ever seen for a Monday final. A Monday final. Normally, that isn't the slot that produces the most dramatic attendance figures. Weekend matches are where tournaments expect the biggest crowds. Monday is supposed to be different. Yet fans were still turning up in huge numbers because Alex was playing. They weren't waiting for Saturday or Sunday. They weren't waiting for the traditional stars. They wanted to see this particular player at this particular moment. player at this particular moment.